Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the Nike Infinity Tour Next, and here are all the pros and cons you need to know about. Here we go. Now, starting in the uppers, I'd say one of the biggest pros of the Infinity Tour Next is just how forgiving these are for a shoe that actually is pretty containing and substantial out there on the golf course. You know, if you look at the uppers under the microscope, I actually thought my microscope was like kind of broken or something. It had soft focus, but it's because the upper textile weave in it is kind of waxed together to give a little bit more containment. However, because it is so porous on there, the breathability really doesn't suffer even if you are standing out there on super hot days. I mean, they only heated up 96.9 degrees, cooled down another 43.8 degrees, and for a shoe with such substantial and containing uppers in them, like I said, especially if you are just standing out there baking out in the sun, these are going to let go of heat really well, especially compared to some of their competitors in the space. And speaking of that balance between containment and breathability, if you look at the tongue on the Infinity Tour Next, it is a really nice gusseted, more elastic gusseted tongue in there, so it really holds you in there for pretty consistent twisting and turning in these. So really, no matter if you're playing 9 holes or 18 holes, they're gonna stay like pretty consistent in terms of the lockdown on your foot, so you're not gonna have a lot of slipping in terms of internal or external rotation in them. And speaking of all that rotation your foot gets into during your swing, if you look at the heel counter in these, the bunting and padding around the heel counter and the ankle collar in these really is nice. It does have a really nice concavity to it. It's really pronounced, so it does sink that heel in there, like I said, for just more consistency when you're out over hole after hole after hole. And on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the burr does get through the mud guard on these. However, it does not get anywhere near through that wax coating on the upper layer. So if you are using these through tough brush or, trying to get something you shanked over into the woods, that hasn't happened to anybody on this channel. But if you are one of those people like me that finds themselves in the brush a lot, in the woods a lot, I think these are going to have a pretty decent profile in terms of any thorns or anything you might be coming into contact with. But getting into the midsole teardown, the Infinity Tour Next, this is an entire bed of React foam, that EVA TPE mixture. And then obviously, as you can see from externally, you've got the tandem zoom air units here in the forefoot lining up with the metatarsal heads. However, I think the biggest benefit to the midsole setup in these comes in the shank. Now, number one, it is top loaded, but number two, it does go very far into the forefoot, almost meeting up with those tandem zoom air units. And that is really good because remember, golf a lot of the time is played on the balls of your foot. We really don't think of it played on the balls of your foot, but when you are going through that swing, it is the ball of your foot coming through and kind of giving you a lot of the stability in the shoe. So it stands to reason that if you can pull that shank in a little further distal into the shoe, you're going to get more stability. Now, in some shoes, that would be really, really uncomfortable, right? Especially for a top-loaded shank. However, in these, because it meets right up with these super forgiving tandem zoom air unit pods, you're not getting any of that unforgiveness. The shoe stays super comfortable and forgiving in the forefoot. So, really kudos to Nike on that for giving you a little bit more of the performance, but also that uber forgiveness of number one, React foam, which is some of the most forgiving and shock absorbing foam out there. But number two, that combo top loaded distal shank plus the zoom air unit pods. And if you look at that midsole setup on the bound tight test, got 22 centimeters in the heel and then 36.5 centimeters in the forefoot, which I think is interesting because usually zoom air is well into the high 40s or at least mid 40s there on the bound tight test. However, number one, React foam is super shock absorbing. You're really not going to get a huge bounce out of that. But number two, I think because the shank goes so distal, it may just kind of deaden the ball bearing in the forefoot. Plus, it is cased in React foam on top of it, so I think that also deadens it a little bit too as well. But remember, for these, you're not looking for a ton of bounce. You're not having to like touch the rim of a basketball hoop when you're, playing golf. You are looking for a little bit more forgiveness and shock absorption. That's why I think the React foam really is a nice choice in these, especially given the shank and the zoom profile. And getting into the, quote unquote outsole of the Infinity Tour Next, this is one big slab of TPU. And this also has a tread bridge going from the rear foot to the forefoot. So it is a continuous pattern, which gives you a lot more stability versus, 2 tread pods on there. Now, remember, like the cleat portion, right, or kind of the spike portion of these is very wide set, and there actually is some built-in tension to these because they are circular and they are kind of offset from each other on the circles. So when you are coming through your backswing, these actually will load a little bit of potential energy and release that into kinetic energy as you come through the swing. The direction of them is that of when you're twisting back and then forward, they will kind of exert a little bit of a force on you. Like I said, it's not going to turn you into Rory McIlroy, but it is a little bit more of an oomph to them. And the other thing I really like about that is because they are so wide set on each other, and because it has some really traditional wavy spike pattern in the forefoot, that width on them and kind of that generosity of the width of the spikes does give a much more consistent kind of traction into the ground. So whereas some where they have kind of the individual spikes on them, or they're not as wide set, sometimes if you get into rough terrain or uneven terrain, you're not going to get as much surface area contact of that outsole on the grass or the sand trap or even in the woods versus on these where, because it is full length tread pattern and because it is a wider set base, you're just getting that little bit of extra stability in areas that you just might need it that aren't as consistent as straight down the fairway. And on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, this is a little bit of a softer TPU. So if you are taking these, on a lot of sidewalks, you can expect these to lose a little bit of their bite. However, them being a little bit of a softer TPU is going to give you a lot more ground feel versus a traditional golf cleat, golf spike. So just remember, you are trading a little bit of durability in these for a lot more feel. And getting into the Infinity Tour next, they weren't as unforgiving as I thought they would be, but they are still pretty streamlined. So I mean, a narrow medium foot, just go true to size. A 2E, I would be going up that half size. A 4E, I think you can try to go up a full size in these if you have longer toes. If you are a shorter foot, you're just gonna try to have to break these in at 1/2 size up. You really want these tandem zoom air pods to line up with the ball of your foot. You want that shank to line up with the distal arch. So you really wanna keep these at a 1-to-1 fit. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, anybody with ball of foot pain in these is gonna be great. Arch pain, because that shank is top loaded a little longer, gonna be really nice for. Now, if you are somebody with heel pain, initially these are gonna be out of this world. It's just once that React foam maybe starts to break down a little bit, which I'll talk about in the performance or playability section, that is gonna be a little bit of an issue. So I think anybody with heel pain or anything like that probably should just be throwing an orthotic in these preemptively. Like I said, the first 3 to 4 months, things should be fine, but like we'll talk about in the performance section, that might start to wane as the shoe gets older. And in terms of the all-important performance, the Infinity Tour next, this is my wife, Kristen. She's the other half of the Performance Podiatry channel. Kind of noticed some things in terms of the durability of React foam, so I kind of brought her in to talk about that. But in terms of the initial performance, you are getting a really nice snap when your rear foot starts to come through on your swing. So I did notice that you can put a little more oomph, right? Especially kind of if you're trying to really get maybe a couple extra yards out of that drive. I think that's kind of why that shank is a little bit further into the shoe, because these are meant for more of almost like a power hitting game. I know it sounds like a tennis term, but it does really translate into golf. I think that's really what I like in terms of the consistency of the shoe, is because they are so broad and wide set and they do have a little bit of give to them. You can get that really consistent swing, but I think what Kristen said about the React foam in the heel.
When it comes to performance overall with this shoe, the foam's going to give you a lot when it comes to cushion and support, especially for these periods where you're standing for long bouts of time when you're out playing golf. But another concern with a softer foam, while it does give you cushion initially, after about the 3 to 4 month mark, you can start to notice some bottoming out or compression of the foam when it comes to the areas like the heel. And that can change the mechanics of your swing. It can change the balance and how you're following through with the club. So at that point, I agree. I think you should be considering maybe putting an orthotic.
Remember, an orthotic will shield that midsole. So I think if you're looking for consistency over time, I'd probably at least be throwing a low profile orthotic in there just to shield that React foam. Like I said, you're still going to get the benefits of it. It's just not going to feel as cushy underfoot. So I think if you want these for the really long haul, then like I said, I'd probably be throwing an orthotic in there just so you're not introducing some inconsistencies in the swing, like Kristen said. I think at that point, these will continue to be a very consistent shoe for you kind of over a month, I'd say 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. But of course, love to hear your thoughts on the Infinity Tour next. Do you like the setup of these? Do you like the over engineering of them? Like I do for sure. I mean, that is coming from a foot doctor perspective, but anyway, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see some other tips and tricks to keep your feet feeling a bit more fresh on the golf course, especially if you're having problems with, hammer toes, bunions, or plantar foot pain, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I gotta think of a new catchphrase for this channel. I'll see you in the next one.